Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legion. This week's episode of Legion continues, obviously, the trippiness that is, the craziness that is Legion. So in this episode, we see, you can already from the very beginning see something was off with David, as we saw, like, kind of last episode, he kind of let whatever that thing is that's inside of him in. It's kind of got more access and a little more control over it because David started acting different. It's something even way Melanie phrased it, I thought was kind of a very good way. Like when David's originally there, he's frazzled, kind of fragile is the word she uses, but it's kind of he's almost a little frazzled too. So it's like it's not like he has complete control of his powers, and it's not like he completely understands everything. He's always just kind of off kilter a little bit. But this one, he's just cool, calm, collected, kind of almost like he's on top of the world, like nothing can stop him. It's like, oh me, I can just go save Amy whenever I want to. It's like, oh, you want to be together, Sid? Let's create this pocket world, kind of like, that I've learned how to kind of create where we can actually be together. Which, side note, we found out about Sid's first time. Man, is that a messed up story. Like, that's got to be one of the worst experiences of, like, coming into your powers. I don't know if it was necessarily the first time she ever used her powers, but that was just a weird way for your powers to be used on you. But going back to it, you had David creating like this kind of perfect world where they can be together, they can touch, they can have sex, they can make out, just do all the things they can't do in the real world. And I guess for Sid, it was almost like she didn't really want to see what was in front of him because it's like you could tell he just wasn't acting like himself. You have different people worried about different things. Like Potomi doesn't really trust David. It's like, I don't see why he's so important. Yeah, the kid's powerful and everything, but this isn't about him. Yes, he wants to rescue his sister and everything because David went off on his own to rescue Amy because he was just tired of waiting because he was like, I might as well do it myself, especially because he has Lenny in his head being like, oh yeah, come on, let's go save your sister. You saw what happened when we were to go when we flexed our muscles. So but Potomac's just kind of like, oh yeah, we all have family and people we love and care about in this whole situation, but you don't see us kind of acting crazy. We got to come up with a plan and everything. And Melanie's like, no, we have to go help him. And Potomac's like, why? Because you think he'll bring Oliver back? Which obviously that's her big motive, especially because when he brought up the fact is he met Oliver, which obviously that wasn't David talking, that was more so the thing inside of him talking. And it's hard to say which way to interpret it. Like, does that thing even have any interest in Oliver? I mean, obviously it exists on the astral plane, and so does Oliver. But does it even care about him one bit or another? That's what I'm curious about. Like, did it say that just to mess with her, just to be like, oh yeah, I've seen your husband. Oh, I could get him back, but I mean, sure, maybe. Just like I think it's just the thought of like messing with her because it seems like this thing. It kind of reminds, kind of crossing over because obviously I'm talking about that show as well, is The Magicians. It kind of reminds me of Ragnar. It kind of seems like a trickster, like it loves messing with people. So that's why I'm thinking like it's trying to give like Melanie like false hope, but like, oh yeah, I could get your husband, but that's not really do it right now type of situation. I mean, he never said that exactly, but it almost seems like that's what it's kind of almost implying. But Melanie's saying like, no, that's not the only reason, which it's one of the main reasons, especially because she knows that him and David met on the astral plane. For her, she's like, yeah, we need to get to him before anyone else does. He's way too powerful to put him in someone else's hands. She also brought up the fact is, as I guess, the reason why Oliver is on the astral plane is because he kind of did what David does. He is like David. He has that telekinetic power, so he just spent more time in the astral plane because there he can basically make his own world. Hence, what David kind of did for him and Sid. Make this your own little pocket dimension where you're the king of it because it's all in your mind and everything, so you can do whatever you want. Your imagination is it will only it's its power, like the place can go as far as you want it to be as long as your imagination and just depending also on how powerful you are too. But Oliver, in her words, kept spending more and more time there, so maybe he got trapped there. Like I said, I feel like the whole him freezing in the diver suit thing is, I guess the diver suit is to keep his body from getting too completely frozen to the point they can't resuscitate him. I guess it's just, like I think it is like kind of a more low grade cryogenics type of situation. I think I brought that up before, but that's how I'm interpreting it. But nevertheless, we see the team follow David to D3 because everyone's like, "Oh, we're gonna have to go help bail him out," because obviously he doesn't. He's going walking in there without a plan. But when they go there, what they find is mass destruction. bodies stuck in the ground, bodies purely ripped apart. Um, it's not just like all over the place, just mass destruction. It's just like he went in there and just set off a bomb and just annihilated everyone. Even one of the guys that they found like still someone alive is like we underestimated him. Because there's two obviously bringing up the fact is like what we saw, it's not human. It's wearing a human face. And then that also coincides with Melanie and that other dude finding those recordings. Obviously, you see David almost having fun with killing him, like peeking down the stairs, and bam, they're gone. And then he's dancing, and then there's like a flash, and their bodies are incinerated. Even at one point, you see this dislocated leg on fire. You see David just tapping on it. They put the fire out and then just dancing on it. It's like, yep, definitely not David. But then there was like this X-ray machine or whatever it is, like on one of the recordings. Melanie and the dude ended up looking at it, and they ended up seeing that thing inside of him. What I constantly refer to as the devil with the yellow eyes. But granted, monster, I guess really the proper term. Like obviously Oliver called it a parasite last episode, and now they're calling it a parasite because now Carrie's kind of figured it out that this thing has been inside of David for who knows how long. Maybe it's been there since he was a little boy. Maybe it's been there since he was born. But this thing has always been inside of David. Another consciousness existing. And then Potoma's like, so are you saying David's not a mutant? He's like, no. David is a mutant. He is hands down one of the most powerful mutants we've ever seen. It's the only reason why he's been able to survive this thing. Because if he wasn't, it's so powerful. Its consciousness is so powerful that if David wasn't the powerful mutant he was, it would have ripped his consciousness all apart. Like it's already like it's driving him crazy to the extent it's in his brain now. And the only reason why he's been able to last this long is because of his powers. If he was just probably a normal person, if this was all this creature, it wouldn't be in his brain in the first place. And I'm guessing the reason why it chose him is because of how powerful he is. So it's dug itself. Like obviously we're trading on some of the things that Oliver brought up last episode about it, erasing his memories, making him, and not just him, everyone else who's ever seen it, like forget it. And I'm guessing that's why Sid could never quite write, kind of like you see flashes of it in Sid's head, but she could never really be like that thing. And anytime it probably came up with conversation, she'd end up forgetting it. So, but maybe it's a situation where Sid was such a good enough distance away. Is kind of how I'm thinking of it. Like she was with David at the time. She was with David at the time, so she was able to avoid that thing. I don't know. What's even trippier is that this thing has taken on so many forms, like over the course of David's life. Because the whole point of it is trying to get David to lower his guard so it could do what it's doing now and take complete control of him. So it took on the form of Lenny to let down his guard. Rewrote his memories to make it so that Lenny was his best friend. I guess it felt like it'd be a lot easier to get to David if it took on the form of a female. I guess I don't know. I mean, even if when it's talking to Amy later on, it's like, oh, Lenny, no, Benny. So it's like, wait, what? So was it also Benny? But Benny was also a real person too, wasn't he? Like I said, it's a trippy show and it's hard to say because that's what makes it so good. It's like it's hard to say, like because it's like, oh, you're trying to say like, oh, is David crazy or not? It's like, no, David's not really crazy. It's something inside of him making him crazy. It's a parasite messing with his head, not just his head, everyone else's head around him. But it also seems like that thing took on the form of the dog that he kept seeing named Kane all the time. I was wondering, I was like, why is it he's seeing a dog? Once again, it was a means of trying to get him to lower his guard when he was a kid. It took on the form of that monster too. Not monster, but the boy from the book, the world's angriest boy in the world. It also took on that form, I guess, because as a boy, that story scared him, and so this thing is trying to attack him on all fronts, on all psychological fronts. When it's like happiness and fear, it's trying to attack him from all angles so that it can control him. And since it's got that, I like that effect of when it was like talking to Amy, like it was in the form of Lenny, and it walked through the mirror and was like, "Hey, nice." I was just like, "Dude, that's so sick!" Like seeing what this thing can do, and just like having that, not being able to necessarily tell what's real and what's not. I like the way Carrie explained it too. He's like, this thing inside of David is a mutant, probably a very old one too. That basically it had its own. It is like a consciousness of its own. It's from someone else's body, but it lost its body and burrowed its consciousness into David. Like, why specifically that? I get because it's like I guess it's a situation that I chalk it up to as like it maybe its body was dying and it needed a new body, and it's like David's the perfect candidate because it sits how powerful he is. Also, side note, David finds out like, oh, from Amy, because he's like using his powers. He's like, there's some secret you're keeping from me. More specifically, it's the parasite that could sense something. It was just kind of like, no, 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 something's a little off here. Like the fact is, I felt it for a while, but I'm feeling it even more now. You're keeping something from me. It was the fact is that he's adopted, which I'm not too surprised. Hence, kind of like as everyone may already know, which obviously if you don't know, I won't spoil it. I've had someone else bring it up before, but I'll try not to acknowledge it too much, just because, like, in case anyone's watching, listening to these recordings and knows nothing, I don't want to spoil it for him. But it's like who his dad it really is, so it kind of makes sense why this thing would pick him. I mean, maybe he doesn't even really know 100% of who David's real father is. Don't even know who his real mother is either. I mean, that's something that's never come up before. I know who his dad is. I don't know who his mom is. But it's like, because maybe that's why it wants to know. Maybe it's because it's like, oh, trying to figure out more about David. Because if it can find out David's true background, like who his real parents are and stuff, maybe you'll be able to, attack him from a different front and gain even more control of him. Though it does, like, I like the effect of what it looks like when this thing has control, because it's like you'll see it over here as Lenny, and you turn the camera and look at David, and David's eyes will kind of like glowing, like they're like his pupils are like a glossy bluish white color, like almost like his body is in a almost like it was almost in a state of constant seizures just because it was taking control of him. But that was what it looks like on the inside. On the outside, it looks like, just like I said, all of it's just David. So, but I also like that final scene of the episode, how it was constructed. It's like they're like, okay, we need to be careful because we don't know whether we're in the real world or we're in David's mind right now. And then all of a sudden it goes quiet. I'm like, wait, what? I was like, and then everyone's trying to scream and yell at each other, and you see them mouthing words. It's like, wait, what is that? Wait, did he make them all deaf, or did he just remove all sound? The way Lenny talks about it later on, she's like, this isn't the time for talking or asking questions. This is a time for listening. So I'm guessing it's a situation where it's like she just removed their voices, I guess. Not necessarily made them deaf, but more so removed their voices. And that was such a crazy. I just like the way it was constructed because it's like there was no sound other than the music when it built up anticipation for something going on. All the while you have Walter. He's apparently the only one that survived that whole D3 massacre situation, sneaking in, obviously disguises himself. I'm guessing his power is the power of illusion and just doing what he's done. Like, I don't really understand what his power is if it's not illusion. Not unless he's that other dude. What's his name? Morph? I don't. Is that his name? He's one of those dudes. I feel like someone else has that power too. I just can't remember. Has that power that is shape shifting to other people. Mystique, that's what I'm thinking of. Maybe he's kind of like, because there was a dude I've heard his name brought up before. I'm not really familiar with him named Morph, who can turn into other people. I don't know whether necessarily Walter is him. Maybe Walter is just a different mutant with kind of similar abilities, just like that other dude that's with the team now. I don't know his name and didn't catch it, but it seems like he might have telekinetic abilities too. His is probably more like full on telekinesis, not just where the fact is that he was able to use his hands and just move the door like that. I mean, I'm not really sure. Like I said, not 100% sure what his power is. It does seem like it is more telekinetic, but I could be 100% wrong about that. But obviously, you have David kind of trying to fight it back at the end of the episode because it's like like that dude comes in. Well, I mean, obviously Walter comes in and starts opening fire, but it's like everything freezes. Once again, just showing you how powerful this is. Like I say, like I said Inception before, but it's also very, very Matrix-like too, in just the way, just how world and reality bending this is, and it just shows you just how powerful David is. Like the question is, how much of it is this thing acting through David's power, and how much is this? I mean, I don't think this thing necessarily. I mean, obviously it's a powerful mutant, but it probably doesn't have access to its powers, so it's acting through David because David doesn't have complete control over his abilities, but this thing does, so it can access more of his powers and do more. So maybe certain things aren't necessarily even David's powers. Maybe certain things are it using David as a means of activating its own power, like the whole being able to put people's bodies into the ground like it does. Maybe that's not David's power. Maybe that's this thing's power, but it's really hard to distinguish at this point in time. So, but like Harry said, he is a powerful mutant, so it is hard to say. Like, can't completely denounce that all the stuff that's happening is 100% David's power and not this thing's power. But then we get that very trippy ending where we have like Sid kind of snapping to it, and then she sees everyone around her. She's like, "Oh yeah, what was I talking about again?" And we have Lenny being a therapist. So this thing has trapped them in an illusion, kind of bringing them back to Clockworks. But it's a situation where it's like they're probably not. None of them realize what's going on. They probably all think, "Oh, this is where it is," or at the very least, I don't think it's just Sid. The fact is that everyone else is there too. I think everyone else is because everyone else was in that room too. So what it most likely did was lock everyone up because it's like I don't need you guys getting in the way trying to save David. I need to be the one to kind of as long as they're locked up and out of the way and kind of in a state where they think this is all like, oh, maybe like if they try to remember, it'll wipe their memories immediately, make it so they can't remember. It's like, oh, this is all inside of David's head. None of this is real. But it was just, it's such a, you can already see it, just lay the groundwork and be like, make them all think they're nuts. If they think anything, it'll probably have illusions kind of like shoot them up full of drugs, or obviously that's a manifestation, will be a manifestation of it wiping their memories to keep them docile long enough so it can get complete and utter control of David. So a very good episode, obviously building upon what we've learned, and now like the rest of the team knows about this thing. Carrie built a device so that he can make it so that they can talk specifically to David so that they can try and get him to fight back against this, and which he's trying to, but I don't know whether it's 100% fear or whether this thing is so powerful that it's keeping David kind of paralyzed and just it's keeping his mind almost shackled and docile. Which was also an interesting thing with Carrie this episode too, like how it's like he could heal his other self by absorbing her back into the body, but it's a situation where it's like it's a delicate situation because he's like, if I do the wrong thing, if I guess he had to wait for her to kind of be more stable, because if he immediately absorbed her back in with the whole situation, obviously he would have absorbed the bullet wound, because like as we see, like he absorbs all her bruises the moment they fuse back together later on. But it's a situation of like if he had done it too quickly without giving her time to kind of adjust and wake up and be in a more stable condition, then he would have gone into shock himself. So it's very interesting because the fact of the matter is he doesn't want her to fight. He doesn't want her out and about because he doesn't want her hurt, because he cares about her, and he's scared because it's like later on when the whole like world was silent, you see Melanie's yelling, saying Carrie, she needs Carrie's help, but the other Carrie was like, no, don't do no, that I'm here and that's fine. She's like, no, Carrie, and then the other Carrie came out because the other Carrie's looking for a fight, because even male Carrie was like, no, maybe there won't even be a fight. And the female Carrie removed herself from him and was like, there won't be a fight. Yeah, right. Get it right, Omen. There's always a fight. So it's just because after what went down last episode, he's even more reluctant to let her go, because that's a part of him. He loves her and he cares for her. He doesn't want to let her go. He doesn't want to put her in any danger. Also, side note, what was that device he talked to Melanie and the team on? What was that? That looked like, I don't know. I didn't know whether that was his powers or something, or whether that was just some device he randomly used. But it looked pretty badass. Like it, like had like a gigantic, like looked some very like futuristic tech. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But then, granted, like I mean, when it come to the X-Men in general, they're pretty high tech, at least I think. So having something like Cerebro, for example, so don't know if anything will like that will tie in. I was very idiotic. I was actually bringing up the fact that I was like, oh, it has to be like the 80s or something that this takes place. I mean, which it could be, but I didn't even think to myself, oh, maybe it could be. I don't know, because I don't know where this falls in the timeline-wise, because I thought like maybe the 80s, but maybe I was wrong. Because someone else pointed out the fact is it has a very 60s vibe too. I was like, oh, maybe I was completely wrong about the date. Because I know that the movies take place in the 80s, so, obviously, well, I don't know, because it really depends on where different timelines pick up. Especially, I mean, I haven't seen it at the time of recording this, but also like what I mean, sure it gets brought up in the movie, but what year does Logan take place? So it's like where on the time, like I think they're trying to be as vague as possible so they don't have to be like specifically tied down to a certain point in the timeline amongst like the Fox set up, X-Men universe, especially with the whole. Well, never mind. I'm not going to dive too deeply. Never mind. I'm just going to leave it at that. Just not go any further on it. But overall, very good episode. I'm very interested to see how everything turns out next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.